As you know that I'm leading my own company, the HR Metrics, and this company was created on the philosophy of developing the connections, the verifiable connections between the human capital performance and the organization performance. I was inspired with the vision of the founder of the analytics. His name was Jack Fizzens. When I started this journey of developing standards, so I was the first member from the Asia, where the other countries like the US, Germany, France, Netherlands, Austria, Portugal, Sweden, Norway. So total there were 11 countries, and I was one of the 11 pioneer members of the TC260.
Yes. What did you see at that time that perhaps other people didn't see?
I see a lot of people doing HR management, but not according to the requirement. And one of the professions which everybody says that you can easily join without any credentials is the HR profession. What kind of profession it is, whereas there's no barrier to the entry. So there's no barrier. You cannot imagine the kind of, the outcome from this profession. So I really wanted to do something different, which makes the HR people distinguished in terms of their contribution and their value added to the organization. And this is what is the need of I think now the time is proving that the business people, the stakeholders, the regulators, they want something measurable.
Now, you're involved in also developing certifications related to this standard. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
So whenever a standard is published, there's always an opportunity to develop the organizations, to develop the people, because you need to use that standard to add value in the community or for which this standard is meant. I started a process of developing the certifications in the light of the requirements. By meeting those requirements, we were able to create the process and the structures around that. And by now we are, I think, proud to say that we have the highest number of the certified professionals around the world, 32 people. With the purpose that there should be a proper learning mechanism as well as the validation mechanism, creating a scenario where they can apply that knowledge, and finally judgment test how the people can use that knowledge to solve the business issues.
Choosing between different educational and investment options in their professional development, how do you present this particular niche?
So in my approach, I do not emphasize or do not pitch somebody with a certification. My unique selling proposition with the people is that identify in the first instance the purpose of your existence and the purpose of your job. What is the purpose of are you doing a job? Or are you doing it with certain purpose? And if you have a certain purpose, whether you call it the goal or the purpose or the objective, that's a secondary thing. And I think the 30414 within the HR context is a very useful instrument. I don't call it the perfect instrument, but a useful instrument to relate where do you stand and where do you want to go.
What's the most common pushback you get from the market, and how do you address that pushback?
See, for example, you have a CEO and who strongly believes and writes and speaks about the value of ethics. So, so you engage that particular CEO. He may not be aware of the ethics metrics, but he's a strong proponent of for example, the trust or anything. And when you engage those people as a role modeling and tell, look, this is what you think is important, and here is what I have in terms of how to measure what you think is important.
Or in complement to that, what we do wherever we are is, in a unique industry or, to standardize things is moving away from the human practice of HR. How do you address those resistance points?
This is the most common questions, particularly for the people who want to, who are not comfortable with this idea. So my answer is very clear. I always tell them in the first instance that standards does not mean standardization in the procedures. You're talking about the expectation of the stakeholders, and it gives you a lot of freedom to do the things the way you want to do it. There's no best way of doing the thing. So you're not purely becoming a prisoner of the process. process is always flexible, but the guidelines is there according to the latest situation, but the outcomes are very obvious. You have to focus more on the outcome. You're not standardizing the people, but you're trying to look at, how to measure. If you're saying that culture is important, you have to come up with some kind of framework to measure.
Zahid, do you have an example of maybe one of the success stories of one of your students?
We were able to develop, first of all, identify some of the critical metrics in the organization, and then track those metrics with the organizational productivity. They were in the polymer business and financial performance. And I can share the annual report of the organization, because we raised the level of the HR contribution to an extent that was published in the annual report. I think the CHRO at that point of time is now the CEO of that company. I think this is the biggest. Yeah.
When you take all of that personal stuff out and you focus on, the mutual goals, and you're able to present sort of a before and after in an objective way, I don't think a huge percent of HR people really appreciate the value and power of doing that.
Before, obviously, there was also an opportunity, but it was not a consistent framework around the globe. And I think now the marketing and the recognition opportunity for the organization is much higher, because in the recent past, you have seen the two global organizations, the Deutsche Bank and one of the subsidiary, DWS, have been certified. And you can see the amount of the global recognition that they have enjoyed. And once we were in a process of conducting a diagnostic assessment, we came across some of the information which was not very positive. So one of the CHROs said that, if this information goes to my board and they find all these gray areas, I'll go home, because everything would be in the limelight. X-ray is just like metrics is just like an X-ray. It cannot hide anything. It truly reveals. And the interesting part, another CHRO of the CHRO of this sister subsidiary had a similar situation, and on his face, he told me that, please include my information for my board of directors. I want to take it to them. So I politely asked him, I can understand the reason with the previous, your fellow, for hiding the information, but you tell me the reason, why do you want to take the weak metrics to the board? He said, unless I don't tell them the weak areas, how I'm going to demonstrate my strength, which I want to, have in this company. So they must know the baseline. I would add value, and I'll prove and demonstrate my value contribution. And without naming, let me tell you, at this stage, if I look back in the journey, the gentleman who was hesitant, who was, not comfortable with, acknowledging the transparency, ultimately went home. And the gentleman who showed a courage to, take forward the weakness and convert into a strength became a CEO of the company. So this, I think, in the nutshell, I look back and I see that what is the value of being transparent, and what's the value of, having the evidence-based management.
And without that standard as a benchmark, what's to stop people from using their own? And it's not inherently a bad thing, because, it's like when you look at the science of measuring, if you're off by a consistent percentage, you still gather the information of the trend. So it's better than nothing. But once you've got the consistency between organizations externally, there's a whole new opportunity, especially for people who are, like the example you just gave, people who are confident in their abilities, people who want to demonstrate the value that they add, or get involved and acquire some skills and abilities related to applying the standard. Do you have any advice for them?
The metric is not just the putting two bit of information in the form of a numerator and denominator and come out. The important thing is to look at the information in a certain context.
And we were reflecting upon the success of the past 2 years. What would have happened in these, 2021, 2022 period that would demonstrate success to you?
So I think I would like to answer your question with some of the emerging developments.
Absolutely,
Number one, that you see the World Economic Forum is a very powerful organization, and they have the presence of the international business councils and the chairs of the 4 leading audit firms. The most recent development was in the US in the past 2 days, where they published a new disclosure, which is called WIDA, Workforce Investment and Disclosure Act. And that direction is the sustainability in the world, how we are adding value to the planet. So in the larger framework, you see the ESG coming up, which is, I think, new to so many people, but the concept is not new because we have to contribute toward the planet. So 30414 fits very strongly in the S, social framework, right? So I see the future very promising, not necessarily in the name of 30414, because it promotes a principles, it promotes a concept. So somebody may not get certified, but I think people would still love to, become more transparent in terms of their reporting and the disclosures. So I'm quite optimistic about the future. And now the level of optimism is far greater than almost when we started 10 years ago, and particularly when I started my company, because I know the same sentiments when I shared with somebody that I'm coming up with the HR metrics. So his first question was that, are you going to measure the human beings? It's not possible. I said, I'm not going to measure the human being. I would like to use the framework to measure the performance of the human being.
There's so much in this ESG pipeline that you talk about, Zahid, that for people who take the opportunity to learn more, I think if they are constructive and positive in their mindset, they will see a profound opportunity here, which is extremely exciting. And it's not limited to HR, is it, Zahid? This is about people. And it just so happens that, HR is often seen as most aligned with the workforce. Been in this people space for a while. It's a recognition, I think, that we've always believed, but now we've got the evidence behind us, and we've got, like that expression, the wind in our sails. Is that fair comment?
Absolutely. So the tangibles, which previously stood at 83% in 1975, now they stood at just 10%. So we cannot ignore. There's a huge opportunity over here. And also, I would like to second your compliment that it reinforces the concept of stakeholder capitalism. It's not just for the HR. You have the regulators, you have the community in which you're working, you have the main stakeholder that your employee.